Hey, what is up, Comp MC Camp Conquest PvPers? Today, me, MCUnbreakable, will be walking you through the popular game mode called King of the Hill, which is also known as 3CP or even Domination. If ever you're curious, you could look up Domination Badline and you'll probably get some very similar gameplay, and it will help you understand how this game mode works. But hopefully I'm able to do this in this quick video. So first things first, each team obviously has their spawns. In our case, orange spawns here, cyan on the opposite side of the map. The objective is to send players, in our case we're 7v7, right? Quick reminder, 2 points, which are limited by these white stained clay. And once you PvP, and let's say you win the fight, you start capturing the point. Once this whole thing turns your color, you are officially capturing a point. And the first team to get to 2000, in the case of the map Limbo 2, would win. And that's pretty much it. This game mode is really straightforward. You capture the points, and the first one to 2000 wins. However, it gets a lot more complicated once you start thinking about strategies, the different player splits, and I will emphasize a lot on communication because, in my opinion, this is what helps differentiate the good teams from the best teams. So we'll jump right into it, starting off by the player split. Alright, so every game begins with determining who goes where. This is what I like to call the player split. So in our case, we are playing on Limbo 3. We're on the map Limbo 3. And this map is actually very simple. The 2 points, A and B, are kind of equivalent in the sense that cyan does not necessarily have an advantage going A or going B, and the same thing for orange. Some maps would actually have map point B back here a bit more, and then point A could be a bit more back here. So that's what I mean when there's no like specific points that would belong to one or the other team. They are both equivalent in the sense that there's no advantage going for one or the other. So these are a couple of things that you must look at when you first analyze maps. How are the points spread out across the map, and how do I send my players? So something popular that you can see in a 7v7 would be sending 3 players B, 1 player C, 3 players A, or maybe you could see 2 players B, 3 players C, and 2 players A. If you think that C will be harder to get and you really want to get C, that's why you could send 3 players down there. A couple things to consider when you do a player split is to figure out what is the best strategy, right? And this will depend on your opponent's choice, because if you're cyan, in the case I'm orange, if cyan sends 7 players down here, obviously, even if you were conservative and you said, okay, maybe this will be hard to cap, so I'll send only 2, 2, and 3, you'll be losing a 7v3, even if you have the best PvPers on Earth, in my opinion, unless you're very lucky. So you got to consider like what would be the best thing for my opponent to do, and what is the best thing for me to do. There's kind of a little dilemma that goes on here, and this you'll be able to do with experimenting. But like I said, look at the map layout. In our case, is it strategic to send 7 players down here? Well, it's actually a map where you can easily get back to top by expanding to the sides using this little booster, and hopefully you don't fail like me right there, and you can collapse to the points, or you can target the points on the side. So it's maybe a strategy that could work, but it is usually recommended to diversify your players, especially in 7v7. You can do some interesting splits like 2-3-2 or 3-1-3. So hopefully that gives you a quick idea of how you can approach your player split. The next thing I want to talk about is your different player types. What I like to call our offensive and defensive players in 3CP is definitely holders and rotators. You'll have this will probably develop as you start scrimming with your teams, but you have people who have a more intuitive defensive mindset, and these guys would I'd be inclined to call a holder, right? So let's say you send players, 3 players here, you capture this point, and you send 3, the 3 stay alive. Usually you'd have one guy who'd be the holder, stay back and make sure that this point is fully captured, and your rotators are more offensive, aggressive people who always want to like jump around the map and go help out their teammates. So the rotators usually would not have sides. Sorry. There are people who, who can go from one side to the map to the other, and they're mostly very versatile in a sense. Whereas the holder, in this case, on the side points, you'll probably be inclined to have your better bow players stay back, because as you can see, they have a lot of range to shoot here. But in the middle, your best holder could actually be a more defensive player who has a better sword ability, because it's not necessarily true that the best holder is always a bow player. I mean, it's more intuitive in the sense that usually players that prefer the bow are more defensive, but there are maps where the points, especially like low ground like this, where sword PvP will probably be more prevalent in defending that point. So you really have to choose who your holders, or it's more something that will be intuitive as you play. But that's something that you should look at. How is your team composed? Are you guys all super offensive? Does nobody think of capturing the points? Because that's bad, right? That's something that can happen. If, let's say, you push 3 guys right here, and then a guy on mid calls for help, all 3 jump and go help mid, but nobody finished capturing the point, well, that's bad. So that's why I highly recommend developing people with a more defensive mindset, or a mindset that is more along the lines of holding the point and making sure that you don't give it up easily to the other team after it's captured. So quick description, right? To recap, holder are people with a more defensive mindset. Don't assume too quickly that holders are only people who are good at both. In some cases, the best holder would actually be somebody that's comfortable with sword, because it's a closed point. And then your rotators are people who are aggressive, more offensive, ready to make quick snap decisions and figure out which point should be captured right away. So that's pretty much it for your 2 player types, and I'll be looking at communication very quickly as well. Alright guys, so let's move on to the most important part of this video. We're talking about communication. Now, I'm really part of the people who believe that 3CP is a game mode of communication almost before PvP. Like, honestly, having the best communication will set you apart from being a good team to being one of the best teams. And here are a couple things that actually work out for all these game modes that you'll be playing. So a couple tips as individual players that will help the team tremendously is that when you actually shoot people, tell your other teams, right? Try to call out where that guy is. Let's say there's only one guy. I shot the guy on mid. Or if you can read the IGN, say out loud, I shot him. I shot MCUnbreakable 2 times, 3 times, and that will help your team realize that, hey, this guy might be low, I can push him, and we can make a play off that. The next thing is you should try to be giving your teammates the most information as possible. So if you see 5 people 6 people coming from B point, you say, hey guys, 6 of them coming B. And then you can say you can propose to actually push C. So you're like, hey, 6 are coming B, let's go for C. And you jump off and go for C. So that's something that's super important, is to have, like, you know, it's a 7v7, so you have to see how many players of the opposing team are. You gotta see where these guys are on the map at all time. And the next thing is, it's small details like this that will make a difference. But instead of saying something like behind you Matt, you should be saying Matt, which is me, by the way, MCUnbreakable, behind you. Call out the person's name on your team before like telling them what to do, because you need to grasp their like attention right away. So start calling people's names instead of saying like behind you before calling my name. And now we're gonna talk about the different the 2 main types of communication in general. You can do team calling, or you can do shot call. So team calling, I think, is the most intuitive one. Is that like pretty much everybody has their word. It's more like everybody has their own vision, and you kind of go like, okay, let's push she, and we all agree. If somebody calls something, you just go for it. And it's more like, it's pretty versatile. There's no assigned leader pretty much, whereas that's kind of in the case in shot calling. So in shot calling, you have one specific person who's in charge of calling which points you want to target. Obviously in 3CP, it is something that's super dynamic, so your shot caller has to be really aware of everything that's going on. So giving him the most information possible so he can take the best decision is what you got to do if you're not the shot caller. And I'll go over a couple pros and cons that I've written down. And for pros, I think that the thing that stands out with having a shot caller is that the direction is clear and the team can act as one more efficiently, in the sense that if you have one person making all the consistent calls, there's less confusion, right? And that's pretty important. The other big point, I think, is that comms will be quieter and clearer. Once again, there's less traffic, there's less like confusion. And then the last thing, and this even if you decide to take the team approach, I think you need somebody assigned in this type of position, is when you are actually losing, when they're capping 2 points for a long time, or you're even getting triple capped, you need somebody to react to this. And in times of panic, this person is the one who will address that situation and make sure you have some sort of coordinated attack, coordinated plan to capture 1 point and then snowball off that, or do something that will help you increase your score once again. So now let's cover a couple of the cons of having a shot caller. One thing is that the shot caller, like I said, has to have a super good macro view of the play. He's got to be aware of what's going on C, A, B, right? So this might disturb him from focusing on his own play, therefore making him more prone to individual errors. Another thing is that if he makes the wrong call, the whole team pays for it, right? And then he only has his own perspective, meaning that he is limited to what he sees and what he hears. Therefore, he might not always see the best play, right? Also, if he's dead, you can't, and there's a push that should be made on C, and he's dead, he can't see that, then there's a problem. So that's why you need to really consider make this decision as a team. I recommend scrimming a lot. Like, scrimming practice makes perfect in these type of game modes, and the more you'll scrim, the more you'll see what you're comfortable with. I think that you should try assigning specific players as shot callers, see if they like it, see if they don't. But just try out these two different strategies, right? Try out team calling, try out shot calling, see what works. And I think that covers pretty much the idea of what shot calling is, why you should consider it, why there are a couple cons, what are the pros, right? And I'll finish the video off with this, I think. So I hope you guys enjoyed. This was MCUnbreakable, that's me. What's up? We'll finish off with a dance move. And we're closing it off. I'm hoping you guys enjoyed this tutorial. And if you have any questions, leave comments. And I'll make sure that I'm there to help you guys out. And for now, peace.